I used to think the hardest thing I'd ever done was foreclose on my own daughter's home. I told myself that moment, watching her stand on that porch with tears sliding down her face, was the breaking point. The lowest I could ever sink as a father. I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. What came after wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It didn't come with screaming matches or slammed doors. No, my daughter's revenge was colder than winter pavement, sharper than the silence that followed Thanksgiving. She didn't yell. She didn't beg. She didn't even confront me. She simply disappeared. Or so I thought. Because while I was trying to rebuild the pieces of whatever was left of my heart, she was quietly planning something far more devastating than losing a house. Something that didn't target my money, or my pride, or even my reputation. She went after the one thing I never thought she'd touch, my legacy. My life's work. The piece of myself I'd spent decades building, brick by brick, scar by scar. And she did it without raising her voice, without lifting a finger, without even looking me in the eyes. Before I tell you how my own daughter retaliated against me, hit subscribe. This is a story you won't forget. Because the truth is, daughters don't always fight their fathers in the open. Sometimes, the ones you raise with love, protect with your last breath, and sacrifice everything for, they learn how to break you in ways you never saw coming. And when I realized what she'd done, what she'd quietly dismantled behind my back, my knees almost buckled. I understood, in that moment, that foreclosure wasn't revenge. It wasn't even punishment. It was just the opening move. The morning after the settlement felt almost too peaceful, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes you wonder what it's hiding. Winter light spilled through my kitchen window in long, pale ribbons, soft enough to make the world look gentle again. For a moment, I let myself pretend it was just another December morning, no foreclosure, no arguments, no daughter standing in the cold with betrayal burning in her eyes. The coffee maker clicked on, filling the house with that familiar bitter smell. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and stood by the counter, watching steam rise like a ghost disappearing into the air. The silence was comforting, but also dangerous. Silence has a way of making you think too much, remember too much. I told myself it was over. The papers were signed, the settlement finalized, and the house no longer in her name. I'd done what I believed was necessary, protected myself, protected the investment, protected the years of work she kept taking for granted. But even as I sipped my coffee, I felt something tightening in my chest, a quiet unease I couldn't shake. The truth is, I still looked for her. Even then. I checked my phone more times than I'll ever admit, waiting for a message I knew wouldn't come. Maybe an apology. Maybe anger. Maybe anything that would prove I hadn't lost her completely. But nothing came. Instead, I wandered the house like a man trying to convince himself he wasn't lonely. The old wood floors creaked beneath my feet. The heater hummed softly. My late wife's picture, her favorite one, the one where she's laughing at something just out of frame, watched me from the mantel. She always warned me our daughter had my fire but not my forgiveness. I sat in my armchair and listened to the wind tapping against the windows. The day looked peaceful, frost on the lawn, sparrows fluttering near the feeder, the neighborhood still asleep. I almost wished I could freeze that moment and live inside it, before the questions, before the consequences, before the truth came crashing in. Because on that quiet winter morning, I believed the storm had already passed. I didn't know the clouds were only gathering. And I had no idea that my daughter, my own flesh and blood, was about to unleash a different kind of cold. The kind that doesn't come from weather. The kind that comes from a wounded heart looking for retribution. I tried to go about my day like any other retired man in his mid-60s, slowly, quietly, pretending I wasn't thinking about the one thing I couldn't escape. But guilt has a way of following you from room to room, sitting beside you like an unwanted guest who refuses to leave. Every time I walked past the kitchen window, I remembered her face the day of the foreclosure, red, shaking, trying to swallow her pride while her husband stood stone still beside her. I told myself I had done what was right. I told myself she had pushed me to that point. But the truth is, no matter how justified you think you are, hurting your own child stains you in a place you can't scrub clean. I sat at the dining table with my notebook still open from the night before. Pages of handwritten notes, suggestions for her expansion plan, ideas she'd asked me to review, stared back at me like evidence of my own stupidity. I had stayed up half the night helping her, believing we were rebuilding something. Believing she still wanted my guidance. My approval. But maybe I had been trying to rewrite the past more than she ever intended. My mind drifted to memories that hit harder than any settlement document ever could, her small hand gripping my thumb on her first day of school, the way she used to run toward me in the yard when she heard my truck, the look she gave me walking down the aisle in her wedding dress, glowing with hope I prayed wouldn't fade. I remembered the nights after her mother died, how she sat at the foot of my bed, afraid to sleep alone, whispering, "Dad, promise you won't leave me too." I had promised. And I meant it with every breath in my body. But somewhere along the years, we lost each other. Not in one dramatic moment, no, it was quieter than that. Distance doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it slips in like fog, until you can't see the person you love standing right in front of you. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing the ache in my sternum, wondering if foreclosure had been protection, or punishment. Wondering if I'd acted out of principle, fear, or something darker, pride. A father is supposed to guide, not crush. Protect, not provoke. And as the winter light dimmed across the living room floor, I felt a truth settle heavy in my chest. Maybe I hadn't just taken her house. Maybe I'd taken something far more fragile, our last chance at repair. What I didn't know was that she had already decided what to take from me in return. The first sign that something was wrong didn't come with a bang. It came quietly, so quietly that if I hadn't been paying attention, I might have missed it entirely. It started 3 days after the settlement. I was sorting the mail at my kitchen counter when I noticed a thin white envelope with no return address. The handwriting on the front wasn't hers, but something about it felt intentional. Inside was nothing but a single line printed on cheap paper. You don't know the whole story. No signature. No hint. No explanation. Just those words, sitting heavy in my palm like a threat disguised as a whisper. I stared at them for a long time, long enough for the coffee beside me to go cold. My first instinct was suspicion, scam, prank, wrong address. But something in my gut tightened. Because if anyone knew how to deliver a message without revealing themselves, it was my daughter. I tossed the note into the drawer, trying to move on. But unease has a way of multiplying when left alone. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a voicemail. I didn't recognize the number, but the voice was a woman's, soft, almost trembling. "Mr. Thompson, you should keep an eye on the people closest to you." Click. No context. No explanation. No follow-up. I called the number back, straight to voicemail. The message didn't repeat, but the silence afterward felt like an echo. By the next morning, the tension in my chest had grown into something sharper. I sat at my desk, reviewing expense documents, when an email notification popped onto the screen from my bank, a failed attempt to access my account. Someone had tried to guess my password. At first, I panicked. Then I got angry. But when the bank officer on the phone told me, the attempt came from an address in your daughter's zip code, my heart sank. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. I texted her, "Is everything alright?" Delivered. Not read. I tried telling myself she was embarrassed, grieving the house, trying to make space between us. But deep down, where instinct speaks louder than logic, I felt something shifting, something deliberate, something cold. That evening, just as I was locking up for the night, I noticed headlights in my driveway. My pulse jumped. I pulled the curtains aside, expecting her car. But it wasn't her. It was her husband's sedan. He didn't get out. He didn't knock. He didn't even turn off the engine. He just sat there, the silhouette of his face lit by the dashboard glow, watching my house with an expression I couldn't read. After 10 long minutes, he drove away. No explanation. No call. Nothing. It felt like a warning. Like a quiet announcement that whatever peace I'd tried to salvage, was gone. I went to bed that night with the uneasy sense that I was being circled, not by strangers, not by enemies, but by my own family. And for the first time since the foreclosure, a fear settled deep in my bones. Something was moving behind the scenes. Something calculated. Something meant for me. And it was only the beginning. The truth didn't arrive with a confession or a confrontation. It arrived through a trembling phone call from my neighbor, Mrs. Ellery, a woman who rarely spoke louder than a whisper, but that evening her voice shook like she was announcing a death. Have you seen what's online about you? My stomach tightened. Online? What do you mean? It's your daughter, Henry, she posted something. It's everywhere. I didn't even hear the rest. My hands moved before my mind could catch up. I grabbed my laptop, heart hammering in my chest, and typed my daughter's name into the search bar. And there it was. A post, public, long, and emotionally devastating. Her face was red from crying in the photo. Or maybe she wasn't crying. Maybe she just wanted it to look that way. The caption hit me like a physical punch to the ribs. My father made me homeless. He ruined our Thanksgiving. He chose money over his own daughter. Those words stared back at me, bold as a knife. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, like inhaling through cloth. My eyes kept scanning, desperate for explanation, for context, for something, anything, that resembled truth. But she hadn't written truth. She had written a story fit to ignite strangers' emotions. She described me as cold. Unforgiving. Vindictive. She left out the part where she lied to me for months. She left out her husband's manipulation. She left out the loan she tried to trap me into signing. She left out the disrespect, the entitlement, the threats. Instead, she wrote that I humiliated her, that I stole her home, that I destroyed her dignity at her lowest moment. Comments flooded beneath the post. How could a father do this? Men like him don't deserve family. You should sue him. Cut him out forever. Hundreds. Then thousands. The share count climbed, 10,000. 20,000. 80,000. By nightfall, it had passed 200,000 shares. Strangers were crafting full narratives about me, calling me a monster, a tyrant, a heartless old man who abandoned his child. People who had never met me were condemning me like a public execution. My hands trembled so violently I had to set the laptop down. I walked to the bathroom and splashed water on my face, gripping the sink with both hands. My reflection looked foreign, older, weaker, a man suddenly stripped bare. Through the wall, my phone buzzed endlessly. Voicemails. Texts. Missed calls. Neighbors asking questions. Church members expressing concern. Former co-workers wanting to check in. Even my pastor had left a soft, cautious message. I wiped my face with a towel and walked back into the living room, staring at the screen again, hoping, stupidly, that I had misunderstood something. But the post had grown longer. She added updates. She wrote that she had no support system. That she was relying on the kindness of strangers. That her own father refused to help her when she needed him the most. She didn't lie outright. No. She twisted. Omitted. Reshaped reality until I looked like the villain she needed me to be. And the worst part wasn't the lies. It was that she knew exactly how the world would respond. She knew they'd take her side. She knew they'd attack me before ever asking for context. She knew, and she used it. I sank into my armchair, feeling my pulse thudding painfully in my ears. Betrayal in private is one thing. But betrayal in front of the world? That cuts in a place no scalpel could ever reach. And sitting there, staring at the screen, I felt something inside me collapse. Not anger. Not rage. Just heartbreak. Because the moment I saw her words go viral, I realized something I'd been too blind to see. She wasn't trying to hurt my reputation. She was trying to erase me. And she had just begun. Long before Thanksgiving, long before foreclosure papers and viral accusations, there were cracks, hairline fractures in the foundation of what once felt unbreakable. The truth is, relationships don't collapse overnight. They erode. Quietly. Slowly. Sometimes so gradually you don't realize anything's wrong until you're standing in the ruins wondering when the walls disappeared. I still remember the early years when she was little, the way she'd run to me after school, backpack bouncing, hair messy, eyes alight with stories she could barely speak fast enough. Back then, I was her hero. She used to climb into my lap, press her tiny hand against my cheek, and whisper, "Daddy, don't ever leave me." And God help me, I meant it when I promised I never would. But promises don't protect you from life. When her mother died, everything changed. Not immediately, grief is more patient than that. It settled into the corners of our home like dust, coating everything, our dinners, our conversations, our silences. I tried my best to keep us afloat, working extra hours, learning how to braid her hair, burning dinner more nights than I'd like to admit. She was 13, old enough to understand loss, too young to carry it. I remember the first time she snapped at me. Her voice was trembling, cracked with pain she didn't know how to manage. "You're never here, Dad. You care more about work than me." She didn't mean it. I knew she didn't. But words spoken through grief have a way of surviving long after the moment ends. As she grew older, the tension didn't disappear, it simply changed shape. She became more independent, more guarded, more determined to prove she didn't need me. I tried to get through to her, but her walls were higher every year. Then came marriage. Her husband was charming, at least, that's what he showed the world. But I saw something behind his smiles, entitlement, pride, a hunger for control. At the wedding, he barely made eye contact with me. Even then, I felt a shift, a subtle pull as if she was stepping into a new orbit where I was no longer the sun. Distance followed. Calls went from daily to weekly, then monthly. Holidays became obligations instead of celebrations. Her visits were weighed down by polite conversation that felt like reading from a script neither of us wrote well. Still, we were never enemies. Not then. But the turning point, the moment everything truly began to crumble, was the night she came to my house trembling, asking me to co-sign that $150,000 loan. She and her husband were desperate. Their business was sinking. They needed someone to hold the rope, and in her mind, that someone had to be me. When I said no, the look in her eyes told me something inside her snapped. She saw it not as financial caution but personal rejection. "You'd help a stranger before you'd help your own daughter," she spat. We argued for hours. Every unresolved wound came pouring out, her grief, my absence, her resentment, my frustration. That night, she walked out. And for 3 years, she didn't look back. No holidays. No birthdays. No phone calls. Just silence, a silence so complete it felt like morning all over again. So when she came back into my life weeks before Thanksgiving, smiling, hugging me, calling me Dad, as if nothing had ever happened, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think she missed me, that she'd softened with time, that maybe healing was possible. But standing in the present, watching her revenge unravel piece by piece, I realized something painful. She hadn't returned to rebuild. She had returned because she needed something from me again. Our past wasn't just history. It was ammunition. And she was about to use every part of it. Her social media post should have been enough damage for one lifetime, but my daughter didn't stop there. Public humiliation was only the opening act. The real destruction, the part that cut through bone, came quietly, strategically, with a level of precision that made me realize she hadn't acted out of impulse. She had planned this. The second wave began with a phone call from an old colleague, James. A man I'd worked beside for 20 years, loyal, steady, the kind of friend you don't expect to hear fear in. "Henry. I need to ask you something," he said, voice low. "Are you, all right?" At first, I didn't understand. All right? Why wouldn't I be? There was silence, the kind that tells you someone is choosing their words carefully. "Your daughter reached out," he finally said. "She said you've been confused lately. Forgetting things. Making questionable decisions. She said she's worried about your mental clarity." A cold ache crawled up my spine. Confused? Questionable decisions. My daughter had planted that seed in him. Before I could respond, another call came in, from a former business partner. Then another, from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months. All asking the same thing. "Are you sure you're okay? Should you really be managing your own finances? Do you have someone who checks on you? I heard you've been declining." Declining. The word felt like a slap. It didn't take long for the pattern to reveal itself. She wasn't trying to hurt my reputation. She was building a narrative. A narrative where I was the unstable one. Where I was the unreliable father. Where I was no longer capable of making sound decisions. If enough people believed it, she could justify anything, controlling my assets, accessing accounts, challenging my decisions, even contesting ownership. But she didn't stop with whispers to old colleagues. She went for my personal life next. That Friday evening, I heard a knock on my door. When I opened it, 2 officers stood on my porch, polite but cautious. "Mr. Thompson. We received a wellness check request." I felt the blood drain from my face. "From who?" They exchanged a look. "Your daughter, sir. She said she was concerned for your safety and mental state." Mental state. She was painting me as incompetent. Unstable. Unfit. I let them inside because refusing would only strengthen her case. They looked around, saw the clean kitchen, the organized living room, the financial documents on the table in neat stacks. Everything was normal. One officer gave me a sympathetic nod. "We just had to check. You seem perfectly capable." When they drove off, I stood in the driveway long after the taillights disappeared, the winter wind slicing through my coat. This wasn't concern. This was positioning. And it was working. The next week, my doctor called, hesitant, uncomfortable. "Henry. I received a request from your daughter asking about your cognitive health. She implied you might be showing early signs of decline. I can't release anything without your permission, of course." Decline. Again. My own daughter had gone to my physician behind my back. Not to help me. But to gather ammunition. I sat on the couch after that call, staring at nothing, feeling a heaviness settle in my chest. Not anger, no, that came later. What I felt first was betrayal so deep it almost numbed me. She wasn't just attacking my character. She was attacking my competence. My dignity. My autonomy. For a man in his mid-60s, there's no wound sharper than being treated like a child. I realized, in that moment, that she wasn't acting alone. Her husband's influence was all over this, his ambition, his hunger, his calculation. But she was participating willingly. She wanted the world to believe I was slipping. Because if she could rewrite who I was, she could rewrite everything I owned. And before I could stop the bleeding, the damage was already spreading. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was a quiet dismantling of my entire life. The night everything finally caught up with me wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No breaking furniture. No storm raging outside. Just a quiet house, dimly lit by the old lamp near my recliner, and the sound of the wind brushing against the windows like a memory trying to get in. I sat alone in my living room, the soft glow of the television flickering across the walls. I wasn't watching it. I just needed some noise that wasn't my own thoughts, because my thoughts had become a battlefield. For days, I tried to carry everything like I always had, with a stiff back and a steady face. But the weight of her betrayal had begun pressing into places I hadn't touched in years. Places still tender from losing her mother. Places I thought time had hardened. The whiskey on the table was untouched. I picked up the glass once, held it to my lips, then set it back down. Not because I didn't want it, but because I was afraid of what I'd say to myself if I drank it. The silence in the room stretched until it felt alive. Heavy. Watching me. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling shakily. A part of me, one I had buried for decades, whispered that maybe she was right. Maybe I was slipping. Maybe the world was changing faster than a man my age could keep up with. Maybe I had become the villain in ways I couldn't see. I covered my face with my hands, and for the first time in years, I let myself break. Not dramatically. Quietly. A tremor in my chest. A crack in my voice. Tears that came slowly, as if even my grief had grown old. It felt like mourning all over again, not for my daughter, but for the version of myself she had destroyed in the eyes of everyone who mattered. And for the vision of her I had protected long after she'd stopped being that little girl begging me not to leave her. My gaze drifted to the framed photos on the wall, family vacations, birthdays, Christmas mornings with wrapping paper scattered across the carpet. In every picture, I looked younger. Happier. Like a man who believed he was building something permanent. Now I wasn't sure if anything in those photos had survived. I turned toward my wife's picture, the one from our anniversary trip. She was smiling gently, like she knew a secret about life I never learned. I swallowed hard and whispered, "I'm trying. I really am. But I don't know how to fix this." The house didn't answer. It just creaked softly, settling with age. That night, I understood something I'd avoided admitting. You can survive losing a home, a business, even a fortune. But losing your child, even when they're still alive, that's a grief that seeps into your bones. And as the clock ticked past midnight, I realized this wasn't just a feud anymore. It was a heartbreak deep enough to change a man forever. The truth didn't arrive with a bang, it slipped into my life the same way betrayal had, quietly, almost politely. But once it settled, it changed everything. It started with a phone call from Alan, my accountant of 15 years. A man who never wasted words and hated drama. "Henry," he said, clearing his throat, "I just received a request for access to your investment portfolio." My chest tightened. "From who?" There was a short, painful pause. "Your daughter, sir. Lydia." I closed my eyes. "She doesn't have authorization." "I know," he replied. "That's why I called. She said you asked her to manage things for you. She claims you're overwhelmed." Overwhelmed. The same lie she'd fed others. The same narrative she'd been weaving behind my back. I felt something unfamiliar rise in me, not just hurt, but suspicion sharpened into clarity. "Alan, when did she make this request?" "Yesterday morning," he said. "About an hour after her public post." The timing was exact. Calculated. Too deliberate to be coincidence. I hung up the phone and walked toward my study, feeling the anger beneath my ribs begin to shift, less like fire, more like awakening. I sat at my desk, turned on my computer, and opened the browser. Log after log of attempted access. Requests she denied telling me about. Financial inquiries tied directly to her husband's business accounts. It all pointed to one truth. She didn't want reconciliation. She wanted control. But the evidence that shattered me came from someplace I wasn't expecting, her old tablet, which she had left at my house months earlier after a rare, father-daughter movie night she'd insisted on. I'd forgotten it was in the guest room drawer until that moment. I turned it on out of instinct, not expectation. I didn't even think it would still work. But it lit up. No password. Just an open home screen. What I found next was not what a father should ever see. A message thread with her husband. Dozens of conversations. Screenshots. Voice notes. And the one thread that froze my breath. A conversation dated the week before Thanksgiving. Her husband. If we play this right, he'll hand everything over when he starts feeling guilty. Her reply. He still cares too much. That's the weakness. We just need the right push. Him again. Once we get the house situation handled, he'll break. Then we move on the accounts. A wounded man will do anything to get his daughter back. And then the one message that hollowed me out completely. Her. He still loves me. He'll fold eventually. He always does. The room went silent. Not the kind of silence that follows shock. The kind that follows a death. I felt the air leave my lungs in a slow, pained exhale. My hands went numb on the edges of the tablet. It was all there, both the motive and the method. She didn't post that viral story out of hurt. She didn't call old colleagues out of worry. She didn't request access out of concern for my well-being. This wasn't grief. This wasn't anger. This wasn't reconciliation gone wrong. This was strategy. A quiet, methodical dismantling of my life, financially, socially, emotionally, all fueled by the belief that I would eventually cave just to have her back. And the worst part? They were right about one thing. I did still love her. More than I should have. More than she ever realized. But love has limits. And that night, staring at those messages, realizing just how deep her betrayal ran, something inside me shifted. Not into hate. Not into revenge. But into resolve. If they wanted a broken man, they had chosen the wrong father. Because the moment I saw the truth clearly, I understood. She hadn't just crossed a line. She'd erased it. I didn't sleep the night I discovered those messages. I sat in my study with the tablet on my desk, the glow of the screen illuminating words I wished I could unread. By dawn, I wasn't the same man who had walked into that room. The hurt was still there, deep and raw, but something steadier had taken its place, a quiet determination I hadn't felt in years. I told myself I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't accuse. I wouldn't break. I just needed to hear her say it. By mid-morning, I drove to her house. The December sky was gray and brittle, like it was holding its breath. Her driveway was empty except for her silver Lexus, no sign of her husband. The porch light was still on, weak and yellow. I knocked once. Then twice. The door opened slowly. She stood there with swollen eyes and the same guarded expression she'd worn the night she begged me for that loan years ago, part anger, part fear, mostly pride. "Dad," she said flatly. "What are you doing here? I need to talk to you." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Fine. Come in." The inside of the house was a quiet battlefield, pillows out of place, unopened mail on the table, the smell of stale coffee lingering in the air. She crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. "What do you want?" she asked. I reached into my coat pocket and placed several printed pages on the table, screenshots of messages she'd never intended me to see. She froze. Her lip twitched. Her fingers tightened around her arms. The color drained, then returned to her cheeks with a flush of anger. "Where did you get those?" Her voice was sharp, defensive. "You left your tablet at my house," I said quietly. I turned it on by accident. She scoffed, shaking her head. So you went through my private conversations? No, I replied, steady. I went through the lies. Silence thickened between us. You planned the meeting behind my back, I continued. You told people I was declining. You tried to access my accounts. And you let the world believe I made you homeless. Her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. And for what? Money? Pity? Attention? Your husband's pressure. When I mentioned him, her eyes flickered, guilt, rage, confusion all tangled together. You don't understand, she whispered, voice cracking. You never understood. You think I woke up one day and wanted to hurt you? You think this was easy? I stepped back, stunned by the desperation in her voice. Then explain it, I said softly. Explain why you tried to ruin me. Her arms fell to her sides. She stared at the floor for a long moment, breathing shallowly. You abandoned me, she said finally. You abandoned me after Mom died. You buried yourself in work. You stopped seeing me. You stopped being there. I swallowed hard. I was trying to survive. For both of us. You weren't surviving, she shot back. You were avoiding. Her eyes glistened now, anger and grief twisting into something fragile. I blamed you for everything, she whispered. For her death. For the loneliness. For the nights I cried myself to sleep. I know it isn't fair, but it's the truth. I hated you for years, Dad. The words pierced deeper than any accusation she'd made online. But the foreclosure? I asked quietly. The lies? The way you tried to destroy me? Her face twisted with pain. I wanted you to feel what I felt, she said. I wanted you to know what it's like to lose something that mattered. I shook my head slowly. I didn't abandon you. I lost your mother too. And I didn't know how to carry both of us. She wiped a tear angrily, like she refused to let it fall. Then why didn't you say that? Why didn't you tell me you were drowning too? Because fathers aren't supposed to drown, I said. They're supposed to keep everyone else afloat. Silence again, this one heavier, bordering on collapse. She stepped back, leaning on the counter like her legs could no longer support her. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. I didn't think it would hurt you like this. You didn't think, I said gently. You reacted. And you let someone feed the worst parts of your pain. Her eyes closed. Ethan, she said quietly. He told me you'd never forgive me for what happened years ago. He said you'd always choose pride over me. Did he pressure you into this? I asked. She hesitated. At first, she admitted. He said it was the only way to protect us financially. But I went along with it. I made the choices. I let out a slow breath. You broke me, Lydia. But you also showed me something I needed to see. She lifted her eyes, scared. What? That love isn't enough without honesty. Her shoulders shook, not dramatically, but like someone finally collapsing under the weight they'd carried too long. Dad, she whispered, voice trembling. I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was the first honest thing she'd said in years. And I held on to it, not because it healed me, but because it was the first crack in the wall between us. A small opening. A chance. The beginning of something neither of us knew how to navigate. But something real. The room was still tense when her apology settled between us, thin, fragile, like a glass that could shatter with a single wrong word. But there was something else lingering beneath it. Something she hadn't said. Something she was still protecting. Her husband. I could see it in the way her eyes darted toward the hallway, as if expecting him to walk in at any second. In the way her shoulders tightened whenever I mentioned his name. In the way she kept twisting her wedding ring, like she didn't know whether to keep it on or rip it off. "Lydia," I said gently, "tell me the truth about Ethan." She swallowed hard, her throat bobbing. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," I replied. "Was this his idea? Did he coach you through this entire performance?" Her eyes burned, but not with anger, shame. At first she didn't answer. She walked to the window, staring out at the gray December sky. Her fingers pressed against the glass, and she whispered so quietly I almost didn't hear her. "He said you deserved it." A cold heaviness settled in my stomach. "What else did he say?" I pressed. She turned toward me, tears forming but refusing to fall. "He told me you never respected him, that you thought he wasn't good enough for me, that you were planning to cut us out of your will and leave everything to charity. He said you told people he was a failure." My chest tightened. "Lydia, I never said any of that." "I know," she said weakly. "I know that now." She wiped her cheeks, and the dam began to break. After Thanksgiving, after the foreclosure. I was angry. Hurt. I felt like a child all over again, abandoned and forgotten. And Ethan, he fed that. He told me stories, twisted things I'd said, made me believe you'd written us off long before I ever posted anything online. I felt my pulse thudding in my temples. "He told me the foreclosure was you punishing me," she continued. "He said you were trying to teach me a lesson, that you were done with me, that Mom would have hated the way you handled everything." I stepped back as if I'd been hit. "Your mother would never." "I know," she cried, her voice cracking. "But when you're hurting, Dad, you listen to the wrong voices." And his was the loudest. She leaned against the table, trembling. "He wanted control. Over me. Over you. Over your money. He said that if I could get public sympathy, you'd break. You'd regret everything. You'd come crawling back. You'd hand over control of your accounts so I could fix things. He told me it was a way to rebuild our future." "And you believed him?" I whispered. "I wanted to." Her voice cracked again. "Because believing him was easier than facing the truth, that I was wrong. That I was hurting. That I still loved you even after everything." The weight in my chest shifted, not disappearing, but rearranging into something less sharp, more heartbreaking. "Did he tell you to fake the post?" I asked. She shook her head. "He didn't have to. He told me a story, painted a picture of you as a man who cared more about money than family. He said if I showed people what you really were, they'd take my side. That the pressure would make you cave. And you went along with it." She closed her eyes. "I did. Because I was drowning, Dad. And he handed me a rope. I didn't realize he was tightening it around both our necks." Silence hung thick between us. Then, trembling, she said the words that finally broke through the last layer of anger inside me. "Dad, he didn't love me. He loved what I could get from you." I exhaled slowly, the truth landing like a final puzzle piece. Her revenge hadn't been born out of pure cruelty. It had been guided. Cultivated. Manipulated. And she'd been too wounded, and too desperate, to see it happening. "You're not the villain here," I said softly. "You're a woman who trusted the wrong man, because she felt she'd lost the right one." She looked up, tears finally spilling. "I'm so sorry, Dad." This time, I believed her. Not because the words were perfect. Not because the pain was gone. But because the truth was finally on the table. And there was no going back. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The house felt unbearably still, like even the walls were waiting to see what I'd say next. My daughter stood in front of me looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, not physically, but in the way hurt and regret can shrink a person from the inside out. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. "Lydia," I said quietly, "what you did, it nearly broke me. Her face tightened with guilt. I know. And I'm so sore. I raised a hand gently, not to silence her, but to guide the moment. I'm not saying that to punish you. I'm saying it because we can't pretend none of this happened. She nodded slowly, eyes down. I can't give you access to my accounts, I continued. Not now. Not for a long time. Maybe not ever. She stiffened but didn't argue. That alone told me how much she had changed in the last few hours. And your husband, I paused, choosing my words carefully. He will have no role, no voice, no influence, in anything tied to me. Financially or otherwise. He used you, and he nearly used me. Her breath trembled. I know. I'm leaving him. I already told him last night I needed space, but I think it needs to be more than that. I nodded. That's your decision. But I'm telling you this as your father, not as a wounded man. You deserve better. And you need time to see yourself clearly again. She wiped another tear, but this one looked different, less shame, more release. So what happens now? She whispered. What happens now? A question I'd been asking myself for weeks. I stepped closer, careful, like approaching a wounded animal that still trusted me enough not to flinch. We rebuild, I said softly. But slowly. Carefully. And honestly. No hiding. No manipulation. No third voices twisting what we say. She nodded hard, swallowing emotion. I want that too. I'm not cutting you off, I continued. But I'm protecting what your mother and I built. Not out of spite, out of responsibility. Out of love. And until you're steady, until you're standing on your own 2 feet, the inheritance stays frozen. She looked up sharply, and then, to my surprise, her shoulders relaxed. That's fair, she whispered. More than fair. For the first time in years, it felt like we were standing on the same ground, not as enemies, not as strangers with shared blood, but as 2 people finally facing the wreckage together. And that decision, the one I made that morning, wasn't about punishment. It was about giving both of us a chance to heal without losing ourselves again. 6 months can feel like a lifetime when you're trying to repair something that broke in a single night. But those months, they were the longest and the most necessary stretch of time my daughter and I had ever walked through together. The first few weeks were awkward. Not hostile. Just, careful. She called every Sunday. Never asking for money. Never hinting at inheritance. Just, checking in. Sometimes the calls lasted 10 minutes. Sometimes only 2. But every time I saw her name flash across my phone, something inside my chest loosened. By month 2, she started visiting. Not with rehearsed smiles or stiff apologies, just quiet presence. She'd stop by after work with a box of pastries, or drop off leftovers from dinner she'd cooked for herself. She'd sit at my kitchen table, sipping tea, talking about her job, her therapy sessions, her favorite childhood memories. She didn't pretend everything was fine. She didn't pretend she was healed. And that honesty, it meant more than any apology she'd given. Her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, didn't show his face again. She had filed for separation within a month and divorce by the end of March. I didn't celebrate it, but I can't say I mourned it either. I later learned that when he realized my accounts were locked down and my inheritance frozen, he lost interest in pretending to love her. In a twisted way, her heartbreak freed her. Therapy had changed her too. I saw it in the way she carried herself, less defensive, less wounded, more aware of her own patterns. She once told me, with a shaky laugh, I spent so many years trying to prove you didn't care that I never stopped to see how much I was hurting myself. Some days, guilt hit me like a wave. I'd wonder if I'd failed her all those years ago, after her mother died, after I buried myself in work, after I didn't know how to grieve and parent at the same time. But she always stopped me. Dad, "We both drowned," she said once. "The difference is, now we're learning how to swim again, together." Little by little, the frost thawed. By month 4, she asked me to help her move into a small apartment she found, modest, but hers. I hammered the shelves into the walls, assembled her furniture, fixed a leaky faucet. The kind of small tasks a father does without being asked. And when she hugged me at the end of the day, it wasn't tense or cautious. It was real. Month 5 brought laughter, actual laughter, during dinner at my house. She burned the garlic bread, teased me about my outdated phone, and cried when she spotted an old picture of her mother above the mantel. And by month 6, she invited me to a Sunday picnic. Just the two of us. No hidden motives. No calculations. Just a daughter and her father, sitting on a blanket under the slow grace of summer sunlight. We talked for hours. When the breeze picked up, she rested her head on my shoulder like she used to when she was little. "Dad," she whispered, "thank you for not giving up on me." I closed my eyes, the warmth of her words sinking deep into the hollowed places inside me. "I never would," I told her. And for the first time in years. I truly meant it. Healing isn't loud. It's quiet. Steady. Earned. And in those 6 months, we learned something neither of us had understood before. Love can survive betrayal. If both sides are willing to rebuild from the ashes. 6 months of slow healing taught me something I wish I'd understood decades earlier: families don't break from one bad decision. They break from a series of silent moments where love goes unspoken, and pain goes unanswered. Looking back, I can't point to a single moment when my daughter and I lost each other. It wasn't Thanksgiving. It wasn't the foreclosure. It wasn't even the viral post that made strangers judge me like I was on trial. It was the tiny things. The unsaid apologies. The unanswered calls. The years when both of us were hurting but neither of us knew how to say, "I need you." As spring turned into summer, and our relationship transitioned from survival into something steadier, I found myself replaying the past through a different lens, not as a father defending his choices, but as a man trying to understand how love could bend so far without breaking completely. One evening, I sat alone on my back porch with a cup of lukewarm coffee, watching fireflies blink in and out of the dusk. The air smelled of fresh rain, and every now and then, the wind would rustle the leaves in the oak tree beside me, the same tree my daughter once tried to climb before falling and scraping her elbow. I remembered how she cried until I carried her inside, scooped her up, kissed her hair, and promised she was safe. When did that version of us disappear? The answer hurt, slowly. Imperceptibly. And not because we stopped loving each other, but because life got heavy, and neither of us knew how to carry the other without dropping pieces of ourselves. As I sat there, I realized something else. Her revenge wasn't born out of hatred. It was born out of pain she didn't understand, shaped by a man who recognized her weaknesses and used them for his own benefit. Pain with no direction becomes destruction. And she had been carrying that pain for years. But healing, when it finally begins, moves differently. It doesn't crash like a wave. It trickles in, quiet and patient. It shows up in small gestures, a phone call, a shared meal, a whispered apology without expectation. One afternoon, while we were unpacking boxes in her new apartment, she paused in the hallway and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since she was a teenager, vulnerable, unsure, searching for reassurance. "Dad, do you think we'll ever be the same again?" she asked. I thought about that for a long time. And then I shook my head gently. "No," I said. "We won't." Her face fell a little, but I continued before she could misunderstand. "But we can be something better. Something honest. Something real." She nodded, tears gathering but not falling. And in that moment, I understood the true power of forgiveness, not as a gift to someone else, but as a liberation for yourself. Forgiveness doesn't rewrite history. It doesn't erase scars. It just makes the future possible, I've learned that grief isn't just about losing people. It's also about losing versions of them. Versions of yourself. Versions of the life you thought you'd have. After my wife died, I grieved her absence. But I also grieved the father I had been. The softness I lost. The patience that slipped through my fingers like smoke. And my daughter? She grieved the mother she adored. She grieved the childhood security she never got back. She grieved the version of me she thought she'd lost forever. Two people grieving differently under the same roof will always clash. But two people healing deliberately can rebuild anything. Sitting there on the back porch, the evening breeze brushing against my face, I realized something vital. Family isn't guaranteed. It's maintained. Earned. Protected. Not with money. Not with inheritance. Not with control. With presence. With listening. With the courage to face your own failures. If stories like this one make you rethink the meaning of family, trust, or loyalty, make sure you subscribe. It helps more people find these stories. Stories that remind us how fragile love can be, and how powerful redemption truly is. The truth is, my daughter and I are still healing. We're still learning how to speak without old wounds interrupting. Still learning how to trust without flinching. Still learning how to love without fear. But we're learning together. And for a man who once believed the damage was permanent, that is more hope than I ever expected to hold again. When I think back to the Thanksgiving argument, to the foreclosure, to the viral post that nearly destroyed me, I don't feel the same twisting pain in my chest anymore. What I feel now is understanding. She wasn't trying to ruin me. She was trying to make me see her. And I wasn't trying to punish her. I was trying to protect what I thought I was losing. The war between us didn't begin with betrayal. It began with fear. Fear of losing family. Fear of losing love. Fear of losing the last person who made life feel like home. But fear doesn't have to write the last chapter. Sometimes, healing does. And for the first time in a long time, our story isn't ending. It's beginning again.